This is not going to be a book review. I want to talk about what writers can learn from Brandon Sanderson's Steelheart. If you are at all connected to the sci-fi fantasy community, especially as a writer, you are probably familiar with Brando Sando. He is an extremely prolific author who also has a variety of free videos teaching writing on the internet, and he's sort of famously just immensely prolific and is the target of a lot of envy for writers in particular. So how does Brandon Sanderson do it? So let's talk about some of the things that Brandon Sanderson does in Steelheart. Number one, he does not overwhelm the reader with backstory and world building right at the beginning. He gets right into the action instead. This is a sci-fi book. It's basically a superhero story, or really supervillains, and the heroes have no powers whatsoever. And what would that world look like? There's a lot of changes that society has undergone as these supervillains have taken over the world. But the reader doesn't need to know all of those things right away. So on page 148 of my copy, there is a discussion of the main character's baggage with the word nerd. He doesn't like being called a nerd. And why is that? Well, it's because of the structure of the society and the way the education system now works, and how the people that rise to the top academically get taken by these supervillains and, put into very particular jobs. And the hero didn't want to be scooped up and taken into these jobs where he would have more direct scrutiny of himself, a more direct oversight by these villains that he's trying to take out. Right? So he doesn't want to be called a nerd. He doesn't want to be perceived as smart. And he's worked really hard to find that middle ground of not too smart but not too stupid, because that has real repercussions in the world. So that's a huge amount of world building and a lot of character backstory as well. That's at the 40% mark into the book. That's almost halfway, and we didn't even know that about the character. So don't overwhelm your reader with all the information right at the beginning. Number two thing that Danielson is doing in Steelheart. He's taken a page out of Aaron Sorkin's book. His characters are always going to walk and talk.
That's where I'm headed.
I'm right behind you. Headed there as well.
Me too, coming. I had another walk and talk to go to, but I think I'll stay with this one.
Did you guys do this because of the risk of heart disease? Of course we did. It's our initiative.
Actually, it's my initiative.
Yours, mine, what's the difference?
Now, what I mean by that is, a lot of times authors fall into a trap of having a scene that is just discussion. Two characters, I say this other person says this, and that's all that they have. There's not something else that's happening at the same time, and that can be very static for the reader. Now, for the author, the reason people do this is because it can be very difficult to juggle both a conversation and a set of actions that are occurring. And authors, I do encourage you, if you're writing a first draft, just have the dialogue. Just have the discussion that you know they need to have. But upon revision, figure out some action that they can be doing at the same time. I gave this advice many times to a very particular individual in my writing group. And he rewrote the scene eventually where one of the characters is doing the dishes while they have this discussion. And it's unbelievable how much more dynamic that scene became. So in Steelheart, for one thing, characters sometimes literally walk and talk. On the way from the first action sequence to the hideout, the characters have a discussion. When the hero is trying to convince this other group to follow through on his plan, they are all in this room that has this imaging technology where they can see the whole city from above in this three-dimensional view, and they can move the imager around the city. That's very dynamic and an interesting visual to go along with the discussion. There may be scenes in it where it's only dialogue. I vaguely recall, I don't remember if there was something happening when the hero is trying to convince this group of supervillain killers that he is worthy of joining them. I think that might just be a discussion without any other action happening, but that's also okay. It's okay to sometimes break the rules, especially in that particular instance, because the stakes are extremely high. It matters a ton. Nothing matters more, in fact, to the hero than being able to join this group. So everything is on the line for him during this discussion. And that transitions into the next point for Brando Sando. You don't have to follow all the rules, and you don't have to follow them all the time. The main character in this book, I don't think he really has like a very obvious flaw. He has a few minor little flaws, but like he doesn't have a particular thing that he's doing that is like ruining his life or foiling all the plans, and he has to like overcome this main particular problem. And you might think that's like the most fundamental thing for a writer to do, is to have a character that like has a flaw and like has to overcome that flaw. That's what a character arc is. And like, yeah, he has a flaw and he does overcome it, but it's not central, I would say. It's not a huge deal. I would say for the most part, the main character is very likable, very capable, and in fact has a lovely improvisation skill that he puts on display in a variety of scenes that makes him extremely likable. I wouldn't say he has a prominent primary flaw, and that's okay. All right, next one. How does Brandon Sanderson write an action scene? And this is really important because this is just how action scenes are done. This is how to write a good action scene. N.K. Jemisin does it this way. Steven Spielberg does it this way. I know that's not a writer, but it's still important. Everybody does it this way. Your action scene has successes and failures, and more than one of them throughout. The plans go wrong. The characters adapt. Something they do works, but then something that they do doesn't work. And they have to go back and forth and figure these things out as the scene progresses. There can be moments of silence. There can be pauses in your action scene to check in with the characters. If you are not watching the channel like Stories of Old, you are missing out.
This is a sequence that doesn't just bombard us with quick action, but that takes its time to set up the stakes. And that actually incorporates a lot of moments of silence and inaction. This may sound a bit paradoxical, but I think it's precisely in these moments that we really get to inhabit the characters and empathize with them as they try to figure out the best way forward. Look at how many elements it has going on. There's the rope that is slipping, the trailer that's edging towards the cliff. He grabs a second cable, but it's too short, and he fixes the rope, but now the car starts to move, and he tries to get a grip, but it's muddy, and then the two T-Rexes return, and his gun is stuck, and it's just...
The character tries something, it doesn't work, tries something else. Okay, maybe that succeeds a little bit, but something else goes wrong. That is the way to write an action scene. Let's look at Steelheart and just talk about the opening action scene. The group that you need to know about is the Reckoners. They're sort of the supervillain killing group. They're good guys. So the Reckoners are trying to lure this lesser supervillain into a dark alley where they can ambush him, right? Only a lackey runs up from a more superior supervillain and says, hey, you gotta come back, you gotta do this thing, right? So that's something that went wrong. Well, the hero steps in and is like, no, it's actually okay, they got it worked out, they sent me to tell you that like they don't need the guy. And this lackey is like, who the fuck are you, right? And the hero's like, I'm so-and-so. And he makes up a story. He improvises, he fabricates, right? And that works at first. But then the guy catches him in a lie, right? It goes wrong. There's a shootout. The hero ends up getting away, right? But the lesser supervillain that they're trying to ambush has also escaped. Okay, but they have a contingency plan. They set off some explosives that force the villain to like change where he's running away, and he's running back towards the trap. But then his superpower helps him escape from that ambush. But now the hero is involved and he's helping alongside this group, the Reckoners. There's a chase scene that ensues and they're chasing down the supervillain. And finally, they've got him cornered. But he's got another superpower that they didn't know about. And he nearly escapes, but there's some cooperation, there's some luck, there's some cleverness, and they end up getting him. Right? You can see how things go right, things go wrong. Response, action, reaction, it goes back and forth between these things. That's what makes for a dynamic scene. Whether it's an action scene or even just a discussion, right? Even in the dialogue scenes, if somebody's trying to convince someone else, well, you make your point, that point gets shot down. Well, you say, oh, but look at it from this angle. And they're like, oh, maybe that is a good point. Oh, but what about this? This is a problem. Okay, well, let me tell you that, right? It's the back and forth action, the ups and downs that make it dynamic. Next one. And Brandon Sanderson in Steelheart does this spectacularly. The goals are always crystal clear. There's never any doubt. Hero wants to join the Reckoners. That's goal number 1. It's like one of the first things that's stated in like the first chapter. Then he's got to convince the Reckoners that they should do his plan. And then there's a little side mission that they go on where he's got to recover some sensitive documents. Very clear goal. Okay, they need to buy some weapons that are important for their plan. But oh no, one of the villains like shows up to this weapons dealer. Okay, so now they have to escape from this supervillain that showed up, right? And it goes on like this. The goals are always crystal clear. And even right from the very beginning, the overarching goal, he wants to kill Steelheart. Now, I'll take this moment to just say that I think that one of the flaws in this book is that it is almost too squeaky clean. There's not like a whole lot going on here. But I think that's actually a strength in some respects, right? Keeping it simple, which many of us, aspiring writers that I am, and that I'm hopefully speaking to, need to learn. You need to start there before you are adding on lots of complexity in many situations. Lastly, realistic or natural dialogue. Sometimes with dialogue, someone asks a question and somebody else answers it. Or someone makes a statement and someone else responds in a very direct manner, right? Sometimes that's how conversation is. But other times, things are messier. So, for example, from page 40, fire at him, slow him down. What? Megan demanded? Who are you to give me? Do it! So, we have these two characters, and one of them gives a command, and the other one's like, what? You can't boss me around? And the first one's like, do it! It's interrupts her, in fact. She doesn't even get to complete her sentence right there, right? So, interruptions add naturalness. Again, you can overuse that. So, be aware of how much you're interrupting people. Another one that I think is super important is people respond to meaning, not words. Let me give you an example. This is from page 63 in my copy of Steelheart, which is the hardback version. Do I need to know any, secret handshakes? Son, you're not one of us. So, do I need to learn any secret handshakes? The answer is not no, or yes, or we don't have secret handshakes, or here's the secret handshake, right? That'd be very blunt. So that would be a response to the words that were used. But the meaning that the character is trying to convey is, hey, am I a part of your group? Which is what he really wants. And the other character understands that because he's a human and he understands context and meaning. And the other character says, you're not part of our group. And that's so very powerful, right? Because not only is it a response to what the character is actually asking for, but it's showing that he's not achieved his goal yet. Humans respond to meaning, not words. So what is the meaning behind the words? Have your character respond to that, not literally the words. But also I wanted to say there are other parts of this book where somebody does ask a question, a very direct question, and somebody else answers it, because that also happens in dialogue. So you got to use any technique of dialogue in moderation. I think the main thing for natural dialogue is keep it short. People don't run on and on and on unless they're talking to a webcam like I am. All right, so tell me what you think. Was that helpful? Would you like to see more videos like this? What are some books that you've learned some things from? Have you learned anything in particular from Brandon Sanderson here? He's a very prolific author. What do you think of him? I enjoy his stuff, although I don't like to only read one author over and over and over again, which I think it's easy to do with him because he's so prolific and really churns them out. But what's your favorite Brandon Sanderson? Mine is actually the novella Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell. I love that one. I think it's got the best twist I've ever read in a story. It just blew my socks off. Unbelievable. Legion, another short novella, set of novellas. Super enjoyable. Just really, really fun and exciting. And I'm enjoying Steelheart. So hopefully you learned something. Have a good one. Until next time. Bye, folks.